Welcome back to another episode of GameInsight's World Cup Breakdown. As always, here with John Wall. How's it going?
Always great, Jesse, to be back.
Obviously, there was 4 big games yesterday and 1 major upset. But we're going to go through a few clips here, again, as always. What were some of your takeaways of the games yesterday?
Yeah, pretty good games overall. Obviously, Denmark didn't win against Tunisia, although expected. I've been holding Denmark as kind of a dark horse, at least going to the quarterfinals. But Tunisia stood up pretty great during that game. It took them a while, but France got going against Australia. Ended up with a 1-0 up for Australia. And there was a hit on the post too, when it was 2-1 up for France. And but hey, this game was probably the talk of the day, and it's going to be probably the talk of the tournament, depending on how things are going to go for Argentina.
Yeah, well, potentially one of the biggest upsets ever. It's definitely up there.
Yeah, I mean, they are talking about the biggest upset in the history of the World Cup. And yeah, probably going to be in games in general. Probably.
Yeah, it's crazy, but 2 fantastic goals, I have to say, taken very, very well. And obviously you're going to talk about that shortly, but some also structures within the game too. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what people tend to forget, because it passed a week pretty quick, right, is that Argentina played Saudi Arabia as a pre-friendly just a week prior to this game, I think, against Saudi Arabia, and won it 5-0. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't play the first opponent of the tournament and then playing them. It's either arrogancy or we don't got any opponents. I'm not sure. No matter what kind of opponent you have, you don't want to show your cards too.
Yeah, it's bizarre, really. It's bizarre what's happened there, but fantastic result for the Saudis. Obviously, the crowd was roaring as well. A lot of people in attendance to that game. What are you going to show us here?
Yeah, got to think of, especially looking at Argentina's attacking structure. This is pretty early on in the first half. Looking at their overall shape. Consistently, I would say, although as time passed during the game, they become obviously more and more frustrated, wanted to speed things up, and obviously Saudi can more control the game out of a defensive standpoint. But looking at the structure of the opponent, especially talking about Saudi, overall structure without the ball, kind of like a 5-3-2, but what they actually were great at, and which we're going to look at, is actually the tightness between the midfield line and their back line. It's super tight, really compromising space and giving up space on the sides. But in this case, we're going to go back to that one again and have a look at it again. If you're looking at a standpoint, you have the ball here, and you're early on in the game, and what you want to do and achieve and all that, what would be your first priority? Where is the space? For me, the space is here, meaning you have to attack the space, which is in inevitability, or what the game is all about, is to score 1 more goal than the opponent.
In terms of here, do you mean in behind or out wide?
In behind, it can still be behind out wide, but I think this is kind of more like they're playing the game more based on what they preferably want, instead of going through what is the game giving us and how can we exploit that. Attacking space is a necessity in order to create space somewhere else. But if you're not willing to do that, that's going to bite. And especially looking at the back line here, Saudi's really done their homework. They're building kind of an offside trap because they know that the initial ball is not going to come behind, so we can really push up and be tight. And I think they overall did a pretty good job on that. We're going to see something from the second half too, which is even more evident.
Yeah, but as you said, they did amazing to kind of keep that high line, because obviously there's some very dynamic forward players from Argentina making a few different runs to try and drag the players out of their space. But we know it's a very ball-playing team, the Argentinians, in the half spaces. They like it. They've obviously got one of the, if not the greatest player of all time, Messi, working in those areas. But what an amazing job they did to kind of close those half spaces and keep their line high in their block to stay very compact in those positions.
And as you can see here, it's kind of more of a irregular format of their shape. You can see that these two strikers is pretty straight, but they're taking care of their six, because the 3+1 is pretty evident the whole time with Argentina, even if it's left or right, pushing up. But the 3+1 is consistently there. They're always pushing a lot of players high up for eventually coming down for a quick combination play. I know it from first hand. I lost against them with Jamaica. But I think overall the shape, the three, you can see that they're more guiding them outside. And the wing back over here is more like, okay, I have to be able to cover two. Mm-hmm. To cover that pass, cut them off that line, and actually being there for the switch too. So he's doing a double job on the non-ball side. And I think that's one of the tricks, actually. Should we go forward a bit?
Yeah, please do.
So this is from the second half. We're looking at, it's been a switch point of attack. Center back 2 has the ball over there. And you can see that still tight, still compact, and we're talking about the 71st minute. They're down 2-1. They're really feeling it now. So let's look upon the view from the player on the ball. It's the center back 2. So let's have a look at that shape of the opponent and your own shape too. So Jesse, where is the space?
Well, in these wide areas here, they've got a 2 versus 1 situation here. But as you said as well, the Saudis with their line is the space in between and behind as well.
Yeah. So we're looking at it again. So space behind, that should be your number 1 priority. Outside should be your number 2 priority. So, but the center back, in this case, if he comes closer to the opponent, what's going to happen?
It's going to engage one of the defenders.
Probably, but at the same time, he's killing space too.
Yep.
If you leave space, the space is going to remain open. That you could either drive into it, or you can actually get into it, wherever you do, but it's about space.
Yeah, and obviously the ball always travels quicker than the man.
It does. So, but pay attention to these 2 players here, a little bit more closer. I would say you only get 1 movement from the attacking, their 9, sort of, Lautaro Martinez, in behind. So, first, nothing, they're standing still, they're pinning them pretty wide. Second, now he drives it forward. So, 1 coming out, 1 going in. But is that enough? In this case, not. We know the result. But how they organize themselves, because Argentina in this game usually were playing in a 3-2-5 when they're pinning the opponent's back line. Sometimes it's an oxymoron to say, okay, they have 5 in the back, we better put 5 up front too. So they're in a 1v1. That can work against you. And if you want to attack space, usually players that are pinning the back line, they're not going to move as much behind as where runs from midfield line, they're not going to be caught up as much. And for every run in behind, you need to have a counter movement. Otherwise, you're not collapsing the opponent's back line.
Yeah.
And in this case, this comes down to he drives the ball forward. It becomes a ball out because that's the only viable option right now. So out, they're here. You can see 1, 2, 3, but you already lost one player. Their left fullback not attacking the box. And by doing one extra pass more, you're kind of losing the momentum going forward. It's almost like a striker. You're waiting on the pass to go instead of you running into getting the ball. You're waiting on it.
Yeah, and on this level, that time of waiting is the major difference here, because the game's obviously at such a high tempo now.
Yeah.
And losing that momentum of attack, as you said, through also the centre back driving, cutting it back a little bit,
Yeah.
and then playing wide, it also kills that flow in a way.
And, you know, even if this would have been a club level, you probably would work out the timing, and if I do this, you do that, and so on. Simplicity is king on international level. And by making it more complex, you have to earn that.
Yeah.
And right now, the short time constraints before the World Cup, even though this team has not lost in 36 games, yes, you have a lot of existing relationships, but probably one of the biggest pieces that they lost was Lo Celso. And that player, it was probably the glue for all of this to work, because he was doing all the things no one else wanted. He created space by opening up space for others. And therefore, he was not deemed by the public as, oh, well, he's pretty average, but he's been doing all the things that a lot of these players don't want to do. And that's why it's been clicking. And sometimes, just like a referee, the best player, or referee in this case, is the one that you're not aware of.
Yeah, you're not seeing them most.
You're not seeing them. And it's almost like taking up Busquets from Barcelona.
Yep.
And then you're missing him. But if you're not paying attention, it's all working, right?
No, it makes complete sense. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's a tinker man, as the English people like to call it. So, but looking at this, Latura Martinez, he's not even first. Second player running, I think it's Alvarez coming in. And you got left, not sure if it's Di Maria over there, but anyway, they're losing the initiative to attack front, central, and far post. They're not covering the spaces enough, or they should at least be numbers up.
And not getting close enough to that golden zone where most goals are scored.
No, and especially counting the far post and the area 2, I think that's kind of a space that people don't respect enough. Because if you can be a little bit late, arrive a little bit later, because these guys is almost going to arrive at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of crucial. So when the cross comes in, you can see Saudi, they're already on it.
Yeah. Plus, if they make those runs a little bit earlier, it could also potentially open up the space
For a cutback.
For a cutback also. But
Yeah.
those runs were too late. The momentum was lost.
Yeah. And sometimes, how do you want to start the game? Make those simple things first. The complexity can come later. So if they're giving up space in behind, you should never say that I'm too good for that.
Yeah.
Now you need to, as well as you're doing the buttering good things, you need to have the sledgehammer too on your other hand. You need to take advantage of it. Otherwise, that's just gonna happen.
Yeah. It was a very, obviously from a neutral perspective, a very nice game to watch. Obviously, Argentina being from behind, they were doing desperate things, trying to increase the tempo, but again, I've said that a couple of times here, didn't the Saudis do so well?
Yeah, I mean, Hervé Richard, you got to give it to him. He's probably got more days together with Qatar with with the national team. Yes, and he's probably got more players in one team than anyone else too. So working with those things for you instead of complaining that the players are not playing at the highest level, blah blah blah. Sometimes it's better to have less talent, but a less spread of talent.
Yep, and we were speaking about it earlier as well, which could be a major factor here with some teams not having so much time together before the World Cup, immediately before, but I think it's come out as well, the Saudis started their camp very early, as did the Qataris too, so that's obviously something that has worked in their favour here.
Yeah, and with our sample size after one game, we think know it all. But yet again, Qatar has probably been longer in camp than Saudi. Right now, it looks like Saudi picked the right time against Qatar. But overall, looking at how they can tweak and adapt, I think how he can spin it and adapt towards the opponent. And that's an upper hand too. Saudi can adapt their ways versus Argentina are expected not to take in too much consideration of the opponent. And sometimes that can work against you too.
Yeah, I completely agree on that one. And from the other games that went on, any players in particular stand out for you that could or look to be in a good way in the tournament and things coming forward?
I think obviously it was history made by Olivier Giroud yesterday. A player that's been deemed as kind of like, he's not fancy enough, not scoring enough last of the World Cup when they won. And remind me to say that Guivarch in '98 didn't score that much either, and then they won. So, but he's been scoring that much, and still to this day is contributing a lot. And I think his simplicity and what you always expect from him and what he delivers is spot on for a national team, especially France, that he's going to always create space for the others. I think Australia was pretty good. They were compact. I think they were pretty good in their transitional play, as well as having I think it was one ball at the far post too. When it was a little bit tricky. Together with Denmark, Tunisia, 0-0. I think Denmark can still do it, but it was probably not what they expected.
Yeah, after the Danish, who are obviously our very good friends just across the bridge here from us in Malmö, what's some things that you would like to see more from them in the tournament coming up? Obviously, it's only the first game now, which obviously has big importance here, but what's some things that you would like to see and that they can improve on coming up?
I think they still have a problem centrally with their central strikers. I think they started the game with a 3-back and then reverted to a 4-3-3. I think it suits the Danes to don't be too humble, attack the game from the get-go. I think now that they're in it, go with it and try to stay true to their identity and philosophy as they've been practicing before.
And great to have Eriksson back in the team as well.
Yeah, I mean, from a humanity standpoint, it was not just Christian Eriksen that won that day. I think football won a little bit more of his humanity, and it became less business. And I think having that thing, and Simon Kjær as well, and the whole Danish team, it's not become a PR coup for me, but it's been more, this is what it's all about. It doesn't have to be life and death. It's more important than that, but it can give more to life. And I think I'm truly happy that Christian Eriksen is playing. He's performing, but I think for him just to be there, it's a win.
100%.
Every day.
100%. And on a little bit more of a sour note, there was another big collision in this game again. So obviously our hearts go out to the defender, the Saudi Arabia defender collided in the box there. It was a very nasty collision again, as with the goalkeeper the day before. So yeah, our hearts go out to him.
Yeah, and I mean the game is becoming quicker and quicker. I think the governing body needs to review the offside rule. Because it becomes such a hostile situation. It is quick. A lot of defenders are just focusing on the ball and working with their face towards the ball and their bodies towards their own goal. And it's a double trouble kind of thing. Opponent and your teammate. And as a goalkeeper, yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
And they're focusing on the ball too. I think a general awareness needs to be addressed from the players too.
Yeah, 100%, but obviously during such a high pressure, intense game like this, coming up to the later stages of the game to hang on to a result, the legs are getting heavy, the mind starts going blurry. It's just a very unfortunate situation again, but it is two players.
And I think the overall fatigue level of the players by playing this at this time with a cramped prior schedule, you're going to see a lot more injuries. That's just cause and effect, really.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And to turn that into a positive spin, there was some great fans out and about yesterday as well. Obviously the Mexicans with a very loud game. The star man Lewandowski missed a penalty, which would have been his first World Cup goal. So some very interesting things happened. Do you have anything more to touch on there?
No, obviously it was a pretty tight game overall.
Yeah.
I think the Mexicans all kind of had the initiative too. They're kind of suffering of not having their star central striker starting because of his injury ratio in Wolves. But I hope, on Lewandowski's sake, it doesn't become a ghost kind of thing that's going to haunt him. But I think it was a pretty bad penalty PK overall. I think he's Iceman usually, and I think he's still going to score in this World Cup.
But Ochoa shows up again.
He does.
He's the World Cup man, isn't he?
Oh yeah, and that's where he's had his moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for the analysis, John, and going through with us with that today.
All right.
And don't forget, guys, if you enjoy this content from GameInsight, please like the video and subscribe to our channel.
See you later.